Thanks for joining. I hope you're all well. My name is Oluchi Gloria Obu, and on behalf of MCIC, the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation, I would like to welcome you to today's special event in celebration of International Development Week. For those who are new to MCIC, we are a coalition of 44 organizations working in international cooperation worldwide. MCIC supports, connects, and amplifies the work of our members and partners. We directly engage and collaborate with Manitobans for global sustainability and strive to raise awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals. This event is sponsored in part by funding from Global Affairs Canada, and we're grateful for their support. As we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're hosting this event from Winnipeg, which is on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of many Indigenous communities, including the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We're grateful for the opportunity to host this event. Today's event is part of MCIC's International Development Week celebration. Canada's International Development Week is an annual celebration that recognizes the great work organizations and individuals are doing to address global challenges to ensure a just and sustainable world. The theme for this year's International Development Week is Go for the Goals, in recognition of the diverse ways that the international development sector responds to global challenges and builds resiliency in people, particularly during this ongoing COVID-19 period. MCIC has brought together two of our member organizations working in Africa, in Uganda and Malawi, to discuss their project and the resiliency that they see despite the ongoing pandemic. Although COVID-19 impacted organizations and individuals in diverse ways, surprisingly, good and positive results have emerged. Today's event is an opportunity to reflect on this with our members. It is also a chance for you, our participants, to reflect on your resiliency in the past couple of years. I would like to introduce our speakers who each have a chance to share their work, after which we'll go to the question and answer section. I'm very pleased tonight to welcome Katrina Loeffler and Christy Bergman-Schroeder. Katrina Loeffler is Executive Director of Canadian Physicians for Aid and Relief, CPAR. Katrina's passion for international development began when she lived as a teenager in Papua New Guinea. Since then, she's lived, worked, and led in Africa, the Middle East, the Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. Katrina has a degree in cultural anthropology, a Bachelor of Education, and a Master of Education in Organization Studies. Her particular area of expertise is in health system, strengthening work in the world of healthcare and health education. And she's been doing this for a number of years. A very impressive resume here, Katrina. Thank you for being a part of this today. Christy Bergman-Schroeder is a program manager who has worked with Canadian Lutheran World Relief since 2010. She's currently managing a 2-year humanitarian project in Uganda, as well as providing support in the areas of monitoring and evaluation, gender equality, and disability inclusion for a vocational training project that targets women in Eastern Jerusalem and the West Bank. She also has an MA in religion. Thank you, Christy, for being here with us today. I would now like to pass this over to Katrina, who will walk us through her project in Malawi.
Thank you, Oluchi, and thank you for inviting us to talk about a project that we are very excited about. Now, I am not the project manager of this project, so I am representing so many behind this wonderful project that often gets rave reviews. It's a project that we've been involved in for a while. And so I'll start by just telling you what the goals of the project are. It's called the Green Schools Project, and we have it going in Malawi in 2 different areas, and I'll refer to that as I go through the goals. So the first goal, and Olivia Kachuma is the project manager for our Green Schools Project. The first goal is to bring agricultural activities to schools to educate them on permaculture, conservation, agriculture, environmental conservation, and as well sanitation and hygiene. And so we are trying to improve nutrition of those school students, particularly in schools that are located right now in Lilongwe and Kasungu districts. As part of that, one of the main goals is to establish what we refer to as a Green Schools Network, where the schools are able to share their knowledge and their learnings as they progress through the project. And so every time we sort of embark upon working in a new school, we add them to the network so that they can learn from the rest of the schools that are involved in it. Another goal is to increase access to water for agriculture and sanitation and hygiene practices by physically building rainwater harvesting tanks as well as latrines. Latrines are kind of our newest addition to this project. We spent a lot of time doing that in this last year. And then the final goal is to promote a culture of environmental conservation among students, teachers, and communities surrounded by the targeted schools. Malawi has had quite a lot of deforestation, so educating on the effects of the climate change is really important as part of this project. So the strategy has involved very much consulting with everybody who will be required to make sure that this project is sustainable into the future. So CPAR and CPAR staff in Malawi very strongly believe in the importance of spending the time in community consultation and in attending to the needs of the community first and foremost, and listening to what they want from the project. Our community partners are invested in the long term as a result of these consultations, we think, and the great deal of time that is spent engaging our community partners, because we really need them to be involved in the long term to maintain what has been put into place as a result of these projects. So we need to have them invested in the long-term maintenance of the projects. And so it's very important, and that really is the crux or the foundation of the strategy and the success of this long-term project. So some of the challenges that we have encountered over the last couple of years through COVID have been school closures, which have shut down basically the project at those times. But we have tried to sort of prepare for the project when the closures are happening, and as safely as possible meeting with communities. We've also encountered, as all of you who have worked in African countries, that we have to really consult with many levels of government and levels of communities to get the support that we need from both federal, regional, and village governments, and also community organizations, to the extent that our staff have met with most recently over 130 district coordinating team and direct executive committee members and 89 community members, lots and lots of meetings. The third challenge has been really getting that community buy-in because, as I said earlier, it's essential to ensure sustainability of the knowledge going forward. And then finally, the challenge that we have encountered was securing commitment to long-term maintenance of the facilities. You know, when anything can go wrong with a tap, with the rainwater harvesting tank, we need to make sure that there's an ability to repair or replace those parts that are associated with maybe even the fencing of the gardens, but also with building the latrines as well. So maintaining those aspects is really important. So getting the commitment to long-term maintenance has also been a challenge. Why does it work? Well, it works and has worked over the last few years because really we are engaging students as change agents. We teach them about sustainable agriculture, and they take that education that they are learning to their families back home, and they share that knowledge, and we really have seen quite a lot of evidence of that. The second bullet is that we improve health through water access and hygiene. So we're not just bringing the gardens because we need to also bring water to water the gardens, but also these are areas where there is great dryness and drought. And so access to water is really valuable for the community members. So in addition to bringing those gardens and teaching about permaculture and agriculture, we're also building rainwater harvesting tanks. And we've also added on now to the project the building of latrines and teaching then as well the value and the importance of hygiene. It also works because we are improving nutrition through access to garden produce that is grown in the gardens, and also to fruit trees, because we plant trees for a number of different reasons. We plant trees both to create shade in these really wide open environments where there's a lot of heat, a lot of dryness, but also the trees that we're planting are fruit trees, so they serve a dual purpose. They create windbreaks for sand and dust. They also create shade, and then they provide fruit as well. So we provide access to both vegetables in the garden and fruit through the trees. We also, this project, it's multifaceted because it also serves as a source of revenue for schools, because the vegetables are sold to communities, and that money, or the fruit and vegetables, are sold to communities surrounding the schools, and that money is used to support students in need and also purchase some products for schools. So it really helps to remove some financial barriers to education. And then finally, why it works is because we're teaching about environmental stewardship and trying really hard to instill the value of water and environmental conservation and sustainability, how to use gray water, and how to use trees to provide windbreaks and shade, as I mentioned earlier. So all of that contributes to educating on climate change, but also on making improvements for the day-to-day lives of the students who attend the schools and then the communities that surround them. So some of the key learnings that we have had through this project are not surprising. I've kind of already mentioned them, but community engagement, critical, really important. And our staff, I think that really has been a hallmark of CPAR's success in our African offices, has been the commitment of our staff to really engaging communities, but not just in engaging the local governments, but also engaging and hiring local contractors, like very local contractors right there, and brick makers who are also local, and then again involving educators and community organizations. They're all brought into the project, they're consulted with, they're engaged throughout every stage of it, but really essentially at the beginning as we go into new schools. But in addition to that, we produce local products, so locally made bricks for the latrines, and that picture right there is a picture of one of the latrines that we built. You can see there's another one behind it. So also local involvement in the construction, which really gave the community the knowledge that they needed to maintain the new facilities and the gardens. So the rainwater harvesting tanks, that we involved the community in constructing those, and as well the gardens, and as I said, the latrines. And then the last one is that building water and hygiene facilities, in doing that, we had to make sure that we also provided training to both adults and students on the value of hygiene and how to prevent illness. So we couldn't just put those water and hygiene facilities in place. We had to accompany that with training. So I just wanted to share with you some stories of change. The first picture is from a school head teacher, or the quotation there. With the proceeds that we are getting from vegetable sales, we are now able to buy boxes of chalk so that teaching and learning does not stop. Those proceeds are also used for uniforms, and they're also used for to help pay for school fees for kids who don't have the ability to do so. So that's some of the contribution that it makes. And then the second picture The story is that some learners have been getting some vegetables to prepare food so that they don't go to school on an empty stomach. And that really is important as well. And that's another story to change, that the gardens have been able to provide that food for those students so that they can study better. And then finally, the last one is a real success story. And you can see that one school went from having 2 working toilets to 10. And this is to serve, it's still probably not sufficient, but it certainly is a big increase. It's to serve over 1,000 students at that school. So it means that there's less use of the outdoors for toilets. There's more privacy and the ability to maintain hygiene. There's a reduced risk of snake bites, something that we often don't consider in Canada, and less contamination of water supply. So really critical that these latrines are built, and we're really happy to be contributing to that. So then the last slide that I have for you is one of the key things that we were, or that I was surprised to find out, was that often VIPs are not notified about some of these projects in remote areas. And as I said, CPAR is really engaged at every level. Our local staff are they are constantly communicating with Ministries of Health, Ministry of Education. And so one of the big things that we do in order to ensure sustainability is we have handover ceremonies. And during this handover ceremony, two VIPs attended just recently, just last year in 2021, to cut the ribbon and hand over what was constructed to the community. So we had a representative from both the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education, and it was mentioned in the local paper, which was something we were really proud of. And we were noted for going into communities where other organizations haven't been before, or schools that haven't been had the benefit of getting these things like rainwater harvesting tanks and so on. So that's just a picture of that. What I would like to turn it over to now is a video that was produced a while ago about from a principal, and I happened to meet this man who benefited from the Green Schools project. So I hope that the wording links up with the sound, but it may not, and I'm sorry if that frustrates you for a little bit, but let's go ahead and hear directly from the principal of this primary school.
Welcome at Uswira Primary School. We grow different vegetables. We benefit from these by selling them. We buy obviously uniforms for orphans. We also have relish for students, teachers, and learners. If nearby we have a funeral, we provide them with relish from this organic vegetable garden. Students also benefit from this through sales. They buy teaching and learning resources. From this organic vegetable garden, they have built their small gardens at their homes, which will help also their parents to know how they can apply manure to vegetables.
I happened to visit that school, so it was pretty exciting just before COVID. COVID struck us, and it's located. For those of you who have not seen this movie called "The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind," I highly recommend it because it really is. It captures where that school is, which is in really serious drought-like conditions when it's the summer or the dry season in Malawi. It was really good to see the success of the project. And I happened to see it after much of the work had been done. So they were maintaining it beautifully, which was great. Now I want to show you another video clip, and this one is our project manager in Malawi, and she's located in Lilongwe. Her name is Olivia Kachuma, and she really is responsible for leading this project and for many of the community engagement endeavors that we go through. But just want to give you a chance to hear her speak on the topic right now too.
My name is Olivia Kachuma. I'm working with CPAR Malawi as program manager. What has been the successes of this project so far? We completed a construction of 7 rainwater harvesting tanks, each tank a volume of 30,000 cubic meters. We also completed construction of 40 latrine instances, and we had 2 major other activities involving the community. One is handover ceremony, which took place in Lilongwe and Kasungu, and we handed over the project to the communities as well as government, especially the rainwater harvesting tanks, the latrines, as well as the permaculture gardens. And we had another one open day where the pupils showcased what they have learned and what they are doing to fellow pupils as well as community members. So what has been the secret for these successes? I'll mention 3. The first one is the involvement of stakeholders from the word go, as we're introducing the project to both the government and the community and the schools. We emphasized on the owning of the project by these relevant stakeholders, and this has helped a lot. The second point is that of commitment of both project staff as well as management and even supporting staff. But not least is timely support from Canada office. Each time we had a shortfall, as already alluded to, we were supported timely. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
That was Olivia. One of the other challenges that we've had has been the extreme cost of living increases in Malawi the last year. And so one of the things that she was talking about at the very end was that we've had to add to the budget because the budget that we had planned for the project, we had to exceed it because of the cost of living increases, or just the costs, the increase of costs of so many different things that we weren't prepared for initially. And that happened, I think, as a direct result of COVID. We couldn't do these projects without our wonderful funders, and so I can't end this presentation without saying thank you to Blossom Foundation, Cherry Tree Foundation, Gailey Foundation, Ryan's Well Foundation, and our many CPAR loyal regular donors. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Katrina, for that wonderful presentation. Over to you, Christy.
Okay, thank you, Oluchi, and thank you, Katrina. It was inspiring to hear about the project in Malawi. So Canadian Lutheran World Relief, or CLWR, has been working in northern Uganda in partnership with the Lutheran World Federation since 2015. And our programming supports refugees who have fled from South Sudan, as well as the communities in Uganda who host them. And we've had 6 projects in northern Uganda to date. Today we'll be talking about one of those projects, which received support from both Global Affairs Canada and MCIC in 2020 and 2021. So the goals of the project were to provide protection to vulnerable women, youth, and children, to promote human dignity through improved access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, and to support self-reliance through livelihoods activities. So in a few minutes, you're going to have the opportunity to meet, albeit via video, one of the participants in that project. Sabina is a refugee who fled the civil war in South Sudan with her young child and is now living in Palabek settlement in Limo district in Uganda. Sabina participated in the project in a variety of ways, which you'll be able to see in the video. And while many activities were funded through the project, I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight some that are particularly relevant to Sabina's story. So women and girls who are displaced like Sabina have distinct needs. It's often their responsibility to fetch water, and they may have to spend hours a day walking long distances to collect water for their households. In some contexts, this can put them at risk of violence, and it's certainly a strain on top of everything else that they have to do in a day. Women and girls may struggle to find ways to meet their needs around menstruation, and they may find that there's little privacy in which to do so. And women like Sabina, who are not necessarily used to being the breadwinner of the family, are now having to find a way to provide for their families in a new country, having left everything behind. And furthermore, displacement and scarcity of resources puts considerable strain on the household, and that can exacerbate domestic violence. So to meet some of these challenges, CLWR supported the rehabilitation of water points within the community to reduce the distance traveled to fetch water. Solar lights were installed in strategic points around the community to promote safety. And training was provided to community leaders, police, and school administrators to help them to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse, as well as gender-based violence. Women and girls, as well as men and boys, were trained in topics related to gender-based violence and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And girls were provided with underwear, sanitary pads, and laundry soap. Household latrines were built for households who needed them, and special change rooms were constructed at schools to give girls a private place to take care of their menstrual hygiene. So MCIC's funding was used towards the construction of a women's safe space in Pellebec. So this is a facility that women can access anytime if they need to feel safe, if they're looking for a social outlet, or if they need to access services and information on health or other topics that are relevant to them. Prevention of sexual and gender-based violence and providing support to survivors has been a major focus of CLWR's work in the region. So with this goal in mind, the women's safe spaces can be important centers for information dissemination, training, awareness raising, and referrals to services for survivors. And through the CLWR project, some of the women's safe spaces in the area have been upgraded to skills centers, where women can access sewing machines and training on topics such as tailoring. And you will hear a project staff person talking about one of these trainings in the video. Village savings and loan associations have also been formed. In these associations, a small group of local people come together to save funds jointly, and they may also take out small loans from the pooled funds to start businesses or to help with emergency household costs. So that can be really helpful to help families get back on their feet after having left everything behind. So rather than me speaking in any more detail about the project, I'm going to let Sabina tell you her own story. As you watch Sabina's story, I'd encourage you to watch through the lens of resilience. Think about the ways that Sabina has overcome incredible hardship and how she's been able to use the project supports to begin to carve out a new life for her family. And if you'd like a very tangible example of her family's resilience, see if you can spot the handmade toy that her children are playing with in the video. I was very impressed, and I think you will be too.
When 17 ising a bit. Watch a benedi ba what on no. Kinamara macha po mi di wo en. Joma men ke luoni en nge joja. Olu ka ri ba ana wane e ka ri ba nge joja ne. En gambara jomo luongo en ngar sele kineni ne. Ana wan ta mana un ko no chiro kan ke wa ya ne ya. Ni Sabina wana timo gimoko ini dogot kila ten ko ni ana ngane ni muna de ana ngalo ko dogot ani na dong ot kenyu we Kadu bala choro. Taman wa maraj. Ni nambe nongie wang aku. Anda wa beru wa kiu na nen pinge chabira chel muno gimope. Cucu buat tiwa chabira chel mi ario ne muno. En nong mun chani chaka danga jela ji. Wa winya nong mutu ko dong kiyo kakar lu ngana yaje. En itu ke pajok ya. Winya mudu kina ngacha chel en machira ario no bolo matire ri gwin. Awo ber mati der mari sada magane anu na ori santa. O meru mo no tigi makatele wina ta. Mo nyu weng no ki chuma weng no. Ka ben ngi mit ne ga no ginya. Atingo no latin aporo kele wanga dek. Mana wa bedo e dokulu da tegi kele. Daga chel ne mo no elati ki man cha wa me ko kale. Ini chet pala bagi cing UN lo cik gua koin. Lo baru yelo ya kulu atpe. Angin mene ko kit mi telu jam lo telu nining. Nana. Ambero. Ajiran para ini. Tira tongo yat. Pero gen wan ke jama ko kino. Tuarong ke. Ate na be no ko ni ni. Wata bene ko ba wala way chuin tel dano angiro be la pesta dano pa man ko mi tampar dano chuin kai kwanya waka iu kara chua wedong kai kwanya chera ka chuer chuin forever madong chue chuin chano no petum kiwi nana no ano la chomo amena kwera wan gira ni nana bere na ye mi bere para free ra mi to long mo ko mi cho pero anena ora ri kikit kwa pa cho badano angela mat ko kara tua la mat mo madong ayela perong to ke mat diga yala kwera ben walitin wa wadane kamera walitin ni wacham kumane chako yai mar ko me ka no yat amon ki ter mi rata ko cha para nyim balitin ni kono ka don ko ni anata ko ngamir mak chingi pota meren ki wori pon enen en ka sal wuneni inter jai wor ka mi kamera kanye ket I wor mi ya tam kid mo ken ka lagi kono tim ngo bet kuman kol ben
Ni women safety ka pa monne.
ana chiro
Ti nywa tam.
wanywa tam ga shel ki mon ma pe a chino ngodano te kunu mene ba ena wa chiro ke bi kunu wa bergini ga nywa tam kit ma miero wan mon wa bet kere group mi yenye yo mi teaching ti ano ngapero
Pian kai mar beru keni ni tam biro ma pol. Ina we ti kai wor chere ken wori oro nywa tam ki dan ti winya gonya kai dugu gang ne yabu won e community yana. Abino awati ani ti ari o manyan wano bi cha training ilok me ko charan
ene atpamon
kenyo
okay
ti awati ani inong kare kwan ker ni chet we ka chone we bedi ken joma go no kon enone piana tam ni buri kan initi ma chala dago im keni ngat ma konyo kuri pe ti tam ni teaching en ro beru be pi im pian ke no chi lingi mo manna ke bio konyo wili chambor lo tiana
konyo
Ena nongan pangana pe. Ena wila pe. CLWR by mga biro ka chung gangan. Awel gangan ni na pe.
Kachene no gari. Ichama chene no gari. Akelu chene ena kera art. Ay yela mope. Ngena chaka wila gwena. Ko wila ka tudu. No wila ben wa ko pego. Ena chene ki kuja. To longa lo chara ke chat kino tuo tiemo dio. Kedwa an eni. Chara lo kwani chene eni. Konyo an chamo kene ki tuju yapge. Ino an eni be pa LWR. Madong oyo machunya mena weko neni alo ka chaka bede te koma. Be munu joni LWR.
As LWF, we had a survey done in 2019. We realized that gender-based violence was affecting communities. One, because of the culture, the other due to limited resources at household level, but also due to alcoholism and related aspects. One of the issues is livelihoods. In absence of food, we escalate gender-based violence because there will be a fight for the minimal resources at household level. And so our project focuses on that to ensure that the women or households are self-reliant and they are able to cater for their needs and improve on their living standards. And that should be able to reduce on gender-based violence. But also for water-related components, we believe that when you have a healthy community able to access water at a distance which is near, we reduce incidences of gender-based violence. There are so many needs in the communities. And much as we look at the project attaining over 80% impact, we see that it is not enough. We focus on a very small population that is about 41,000, but you realize that the population is huge. Already, only the host communities are about 144,000, and the refugees are about 57,000. So if you also compute the level of support that we've offered, it still does not support everybody, and yet most of the population are actually suffering. So some of our interventions are actually building on our past experiences. For example, if we focus on livelihoods, we are building capacities of the previous groups that we're able to support to take them to another higher level where they can be self-sustained and they can be able to manage their own enterprises and be able to sustain their own living. So we build on existing structures, existing opportunities to be able to create longer-term impact. For example, we have women's safe spaces that we've constructed. It's not enough to have a safe space constructed. It must be functionalized so that it realizes its ultimate outcome.
Thank you very much, Katrina and Christy, for those wonderful presentation. We're moving on to our question and answer section. I must say that the project we've just heard about, both of them are not only life-saving, they also embody the theme of resilience, which we're exploring today. And I like how both projects actually involved local participation and local ownership. So Katrina, I particularly love how this project is, let's say, at this intersection where it's addressing several SDGs at the same time. For instance, providing access to sustainable food, promoting hygiene habits for students, and just generally helping to improve the health outcomes for communities in Malawi. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how you get to balance these goals to ensure that the project objectives are met. while also addressing these key SDGs at the same time?
It's actually not very hard because we're able to touch on a number of SDGs just because of the needs that are expressed to us from the schools and from the communities. So I mean, the fact that Malawi has gone through quite a lot of deforestation, and the results of that allows us to really focus and justify or rationalize going in and working on permaculture and agriculture and education and planting those trees, and then addressing poverty issues with that. So you've got that SDG, the SDG of just decreasing poverty, but also increasing access to hygiene and sanitation, which crosses over because you need water to plant, to support the gardens, but then you also need that food to be clean and to be treated that way, and hands to be clean and so on. And so all of that crosses over. So looking at, I would agree with you that SDG number 3, good health and well-being is so important. And it goes along really well with the clean water and sanitation. So it's not hard to sort of almost touch on many of those SDGs because it comes along quite naturally and fits in beautifully with a project that is very grassroots, but very appreciated by the communities.
Oh, thank you. Excellent. I agree, really. And Christy, for the video that we just saw for your project in Uganda, individual resilience comes across very strongly in Sabina's story. I mean, we see that despite the challenges, she took steps to rebuild her life and that of her family, and even adopting a child. And we also see how foundational that the work that you do is very important when it comes to contributing to individual and community resilience. I just like with the project in Malawi, I particularly like how this project in Uganda, addressed several issues at the same time. There was a strong awareness raising component on sexual and reproductive health and rights, sexual-based violence. There's also that livelihood opportunity, which I think it's also very foundational to sustaining people and communities. And I think there was also water and sanitation hygiene component to that project as well. Before I go back to the connections with the host community, I was wondering if you could also address how you've been able to balance all these issues while ensuring that the project's goals were met.
I mean, I think Katrina's absolutely right, is that it almost happens organically, in that if you're trying to, improve quality of life or support people to reach their goals, to improve their own lives, I think you have to be working at that from several different directions. And I think some goals support other goals. For example, providing access to clean water. We heard the staff member in the video say that can actually reduce violence, reduce gender-based violence. So I mean, I think there's lots of carryover between the different sectors, and promoting health and hygiene. If people are healthy, they're able to seek livelihoods opportunities and to provide for themselves and their families. So I think in these kind of projects, you're always working at multiple of the SDGs at the same time. So yeah, absolutely, it's important to be working in multiple directions at the same time.
Excellent, thank you very much, Christy and Katrina. So following up on that, so how have both CPAR and CLWR, how have you seen your roles change, during this project, as in during COVID-19?
So I think that's a good question. And I think that a lot of organizations have had to change the way that they operate, in that maybe there was more involvement from the Canadian side of the organization previously. I would say that our Malawi office, so our country program manager, has been in place for, I think it's 23 years. He's been around a long time, much longer than I have been involved in CPAR. And our Malawi office works very autonomously anyway. They were prior to my coming on board, and they are now and have been even more. Well, you see, it's a pretty autonomous relationship, I would say. We provide in Canada, the office provides an accountability structure or framework, and we also provide a great deal of support. And I like to say that what COVID has done is allowed us to see where our complementarities are and where we can support each other in many different ways. But the autonomy of the Malawi office was already in place. They were working pretty independently prior to COVID. The fact that we can't travel there, or haven't been able to for the last few years, as a result of the autonomous nature of the office already, it didn't suffer at all. They didn't, they needed to consult with us, and we needed to share and provide support where needed. And we continue to do so, but it's a pretty interdependent relationship. So I would say that, yes, that has been amplified through COVID, but it was there to start with. Even before me, it was the direction it was going in, and it was already there.
So I have a bit of a unique perspective, I guess, in that I was actually on maternity leave for much of the pandemic and just returned back to work in October. So my expectation coming back was that the work that we were doing must have dramatically changed. I know everything would be different, and I wouldn't even recognize the type of work that we're doing because I saw how dramatically COVID had altered our lives in Canada. So I thought surely that must be the same. And I think I was surprised to find that the work has continued in much the same way, but with some modifications. And I think in this project in particular, we're seeing that COVID has caused or exacerbated pre-existing problems. And we've seen things like, due to lockdowns, due to, just additional stress. There have been things like increases in gender-based violence. There's been more early marriages and teen pregnancies due to complications with transportation. It's limited people's access to healthcare, and things like there's been an increase in out-of-hospital deliveries, and unfortunately an increase in maternal deaths as a result of that. So I think the kind of work that this project did, and now we're into sort of a second phase of that project, I think has become even more important. We have had to modify how we do things, like, for example, for the awareness raising sessions, related to gender-based violence or sexual and reproductive health and rights, rather than having large group gatherings, we've had to have many smaller group sessions, or even door-to-door approaches or billboards. Just had to get creative in how we go about some of those things. But I think by and large, the work has just continued. This is, I think, for a lot of parts of the world, COVID has been another crisis layered on to a whole bunch of already pre-existing crises. So I think the way that people approach it is maybe a bit different than some of us who COVID might be our huge crisis that we're experiencing right now, but a lot of these people are experiencing many crises at the same time.
Thank you both. Those were well articulated. I must say that the question which you just answered came from one of our participants in the audience. So please keep those questions coming in. And I think I'm just going to read another one here. One other question that we have still on COVID. Do you see any impact of unequal COVID vaccine access in your project?
I mean, that's a really good question. Like I know Uganda has been rolling out vaccines, and I don't know specifically, in this community where vaccine rates are, but I think overall, sometimes the people who need access to the vaccines the most are the people who have the least access. And of course, that complicates everything else. If you're in an area where, for example, like if you're in an area where you don't have good access to clean water, like that makes sanitation and hand washing and all those kind of things we need to do to keep ourselves healthy. That makes it even more difficult. So then I think lack of access to vaccines, which I know a lot of people in a lot of different parts of the world are experiencing. Again, it's just one more thing to make your risk higher, to make your life more difficult. So it's certainly something that that needs to be addressed is the access to vaccines and making that more equitable.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. I think you answered that well. But it's an interesting question because I think now I'm not an expert, but I think we're at a crossroads that we need to make more vaccines available around the world, and these countries don't have access to enough vaccines, but concurrently we need to be doing education because I think that what we also are not potentially considering, although I suspect on this call we've got a lot of expertise, what we're not considering is the vaccine hesitancy that is also prevalent in certainly in Malawi and in other countries. It's prevalent everywhere around the world. We have it here in Canada. So, but that I think has to be handled at the same time as increasing access to vaccine, or increasing the amount of vaccines available and how to distribute them quickly enough so that they don't expire, because distributions are also going to be challenging. Limited resources to distribute and actually give the vaccines have to be thought out carefully. And I know that certainly the Malawian government is thinking about that. I can't remember what the percentage of people are that are vaccinated, but it's very, very low, of course. And that has to do not only with the lack of access to vaccine, but it also has to do with vaccine hesitancy and the distribution channels of the vaccine. So I think all of those have to be considered very carefully. We all know that, we need to get way more people vaccinated for all of us to be safe. So, but I think it's a three-pronged issue. And that's my humble, non-expert opinion.
Thank you, Katrina. That was well said, and I agree with you on that. But there's moving on back to the project. There was something you said, which I also agree with you on. You had mentioned that the project, which we can see is very much grounded in local participation and local engagement, local ownership. And I was wondering if there were existing structures and knowledge that you drew on to make this project successful.
Knowledge for sure. I mean, and I think it does have a lot to do with the fact that CPAR has been in Malawi for a long time. So they've built up the relationships with the community groups, and there is trust. Now, we're not in every area of Malawi, but where we have been working for long periods of time, there is, I know, a trusting relationship. And so I won't refer to sort of a knowledge bank, I think, which is what you're talking about, but I would refer to the expertise and experience of our staff that we rely heavily on, and that it has to come from them. For me, they are the front line. But in addition, then the front line beyond them, their front line is the community. And they are definitely tapping into the resources in the community, including youth clubs, women's groups, religious groups, and then the multiple layers of government. They are just constantly, and they talk about the fact that they have a lot of meetings, and that's what has to happen in order to get full engagement with a diverse group of people, and I think only that is where sustainability will come from, when ownership is taken by the community. I also feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but but definitely that's I think what our staff in Malawi are particularly gifted at.
Thank you, Katrina. And Christy, Same thing with local engagement. The projects that we saw, Sabina's story, it was mentioned that there was some sort of support that was provided to the host community. I was wondering if you could speak about the type of support that you provide to the host, or was provided, since this is now a past project, to the host community. Generally, what sort of support could you say helped?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we found when we work on projects, especially CLWR does a lot of work with refugee populations, a lot of populations that are displaced to neighboring countries. And what we're finding is oftentimes, the people in those countries don't necessarily have all the resources that they need. Often they're struggling to make ends meet as well. And so if you're supporting the refugee population, it can actually create tension with the host community, because they lack water, but suddenly this refugee community that's just popped up down the road is having all these international organizations, coming in and providing them with support. And now they have clean water, but the community of nationals doesn't have access to clean water. So we found that it's very important to take a balanced approach and make sure that we're also supporting the host communities. So often the support that we're providing is being provided, based on need, of course, but being provided both to host communities and refugee communities. So that could be training, or it could be again, access to water, or I'm trying to think in this community or in this project, the livelihoods activities. So often we'll do, the training, and if we're doing like providing agricultural inputs, we might provide that to the host community as well. So the idea is to, meet those needs, but also to mitigate potential tension that can happen.
Thank you.
People are struggling, tension happens. So
yeah, thank you, Christy. Thanks. And I know we've run out of time, but we have one question here from one of our participants, and I'm just going to read it out. It says, with increased gender-based violence on the pandemic, from your experience, what are the good practices you continue to apply to address gender-based violence on the current challenging situation? And you can just make this really short. I know we don't really have much time.
Short and sweet. Good practices, I think, come from the community. And so I'm not going to specify because that would be too long. But I think just really keeping your ear to the ground and supporting our staff to keep their ear to the ground with what can we do and what's happening regarding gender-based violence, because yes, it has increased through COVID. And exactly, I mean, that video showed it beautifully and talked about it, that you shared, Christy, and so really important to provide those psychosocial supports. I think that's going to be more needed as time goes by because of the increase in gender-based violence. So yeah, really being in touch with the community and educating not only women, or providing for women so that they can be empowered to support themselves and to be independent, but also looking at the education to provide to men and to boys.
Thank you so much. Christy, I was wondering if you have anything to add to that.
Katrina, I think you and I were thinking along the same lines. Yeah, I think absolutely working with communities is so important. So working with what we call duty bearers, so people who have responsibilities to take care of their communities, so that whether that's like local leaders or religious leaders, like local administration of schools, that kind of thing, police. And exactly what you said at the end is we often think of gender-based violence as sort of like a women's issue. And so we talk to women about gender-based violence and, how to, support themselves and each other to, get out of bad situations and that kind of thing. But it's equally important to work with men and boys and to use them as advocates and as role models in what positive gender relations can look like.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I would say it's unfortunate, but I think we've come to the end of today's wonderful event. Thank you all for joining, and thank you very much to Katrina and Christy for sharing your knowledge with us today. And thank you to our wonderful participants. Thank you all for all the questions. I'm sorry if I wasn't able to read some of them. So if you want to hear more about the work that we do, please remember to sign up for our monthly newsletter. Thank you so very much. Thank you for joining. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Oluchi, and thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.